Hello and welcome to Life Talk Burrito. I'm your host, Michelle Gunn, and the other host is with us, Shreyas Kaushik. Shreyas, say hello.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us live on the Life Talk Burrito. A bit of an internet connection issues, but I think we will be able to pull it off because you wouldn't want to miss what Lynn, our special guest, would like to share. Lynn, welcome to the show. It's nice to have you here with us.
Thanks, Shreyas and Michelle. It's good to be here with you guys. And I love how did you guys come up with that name? I absolutely love it. Burrito.
That's Shreyas. Shreyas gets full credit for that. I was really resistant in the beginning, so.
Well, thanks for having me. Huh? All right, we're going to pull this off. We're going to pull this off. I know it. You know what? We don't have to be perfect in this world. We just have to kind of just be ourselves. This is let's keep it real. So I'm Lynn DelGaudio. I am a recovering corporate pro turned speaker, author, and health coach. And I take my life experiences, specifically through the healing journey through TBI and the strategies I learned through that healing to help others find increased purpose and peace and decrease stress and just lead a more deliberate, purposeful life. And we lost you, Michelle, but we got you back. That's what matters.
Did only I disappear?
Yeah. That's from my perspective.
That is very interesting since I'm the one broadcasting and I'm the only one who disappears. But hey, but I like the fact that I at least heard you say we don't have to be perfect. So awesome. I just want to remind.
Even though you're probably cutting it off, but I do know that you will be there in spirit and we'll be able to pull it off successfully.
I want to remind our participants in the audience to go ahead and say hello, tell us where you're from, and if you have questions, drop them in the comments.
Yes, the audience have started to show up. So just a reminder once again, so if you see either of us drop out, it's okay because we can still hear each other. And Lynn, so just don't bother if either of us drop out, or even if you drop out, we'll just repeat the question and get you to answer one more time. So on that note, some of the topics that we will be discussing is quite important, and considering March is the TBI Awareness Month. So TBI stands for Traumatic Brain Injury, and we will be asking Lynn to share her journey of how actually she got TBI, what's her recovery like, and eventually how coaching is helping many people out there to gain that confidence and own it and start making the positive changes. So Lynn, back to you. So what is TBI and what is your journey with TBI?
So I just want, Elio mentions Paul S. Rogers. Oh, yes, for sure. Very good friend of mine, Paul Rogers. And if you guys haven't connected with him, I highly recommend you do, because he's just a wonderful person. And we have very similar experiences with respect to our brain injuries. It's different in how they happened, but very similar things that occurred in the mind going through our healing. So mine, and the TBI is any blow to the head, and it can be just every TBI is different. A lot of people out there have been like, well, I don't understand because I just hit it, didn't even hit it that hard. It really doesn't matter. Every person is so different. And there are many types of brain injury other than traumatic brain injury. There are many, many types of brain injury that are so misunderstood. And truly, we are still just in the infancy of understanding TBI and understanding how to care for TBI. And, I'm doing a lot of work with NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, this coming year, because they're really expanding their scope to do a lot more with TBI. And a lot of the things, it can be very isolating. And in my case, I didn't have a caregiver because I was new to Raleigh, and and so it was just me and my dog. And when you've got a traumatic brain and spinal cord injury, think about how I don't even know how I got through it really on my own, other than I did ask for help a lot. Um, but my injury was, I was at the gym. I had just finished an 8 mile or so run, and I sat down at what they call the lat pull down machine. So you sit on a bench, and there's a metal bar above, and then there's a pulley system, and you load the weight, and then you pull the bar down. So I had about 80 pounds loaded. And in one of the pull downs, the whole system snapped. So that bar came crashing into my head with a force of 80 pounds. It twisted and rotated my axis. So I had a neck injury, which I just last year finally got about as straight as I'm going to get, because I was still off about like 5 degrees. Um, and then the impact, you can imagine that impact in the seated position. Think about the spine. It's just trying to hold you up. It created this hyper shifting in the low back. And then that shifting created the formation of a synovial cyst on the spinal cord, which had all sorts of implications. So it took me up till this. I mean, I still have symptoms to this day. But I had every symptom in the book. You name it, I had it. Blurred double vision, stuttered, stammered speech. Memory was shot. I didn't know where I lived, who people were, my friends, relatives, whatever. I knew my dog. That was for sure. Was a fall risk for many, many months. Vision and vestibular systems out of whack. It took me a year to get my vision back. I still have problems with dizziness, and sometimes I may even do it while we talk here. I'll still just did it stutter a little bit. And I'll still sometimes when I talk about the injury, I may even get symptomatic with some slight nausea and dizziness just for a moment. It's because the body remembers, and it just reacts. But for me, what helped that whole healing process, the very first thing that I learned was that, hey, from Finland, awesome. The very first thing I learned, because I was new here and I worked remotely. So the company I worked for was a couple hours south, and my family was up in Connecticut. So people would call to check on me, and they would immediately go into this, "Oh my God, aren't you mad? Aren't you like, what are you going to do? This is horrific. What happened to you? My God, you're never going to run again." And I swear, when I heard that, I literally felt my brain swell in the head. There was all this pressure because it was inflaming, and I get eye pain and what they call. See, I just got nauseous and dizzy talking about it just now. And I know, as you mentioned, Paul Rogers, we talk about this all the time because but you can't see it probably, but I feel it. So I would be re-traumatizing myself when I let those negative or anger into my brain. And so I began to think to myself, well, I intuitively knew that in order to heal my body, I was going to have to keep this calm. And so I just started practicing, when bad things come in, I'm going to shift them because I don't want that negative in. I'm going to focus on the ocean. I'm going to focus on petting my dog. I'm going to think about a puppy. I'm just going to think about something that feels better. And that was really helpful. And then one day I was sitting, going, and there was nothing negative in my field, but I was like, well, what do I want to think about? And I was like, hey, I think I want to think about an ocean again. And I realized I don't have to wait for negative thought to enter my field. I get to choose how I want to use this. And that kind of was mind blowing. I never thought about using my thinking deliberately and really just, and then I thought to myself, not only can I choose what I want to think about, but I can also choose how I want to think about it. I can actually bring sensory into it. And so I can actually think about an ocean, or I can think about an ocean and the ocean breeze feathering over me and the salty air. And that became so much fun and it felt so good. And so that was just like then I just started creating these little exercises. And someone said to me one time, thank God you were doing the rear pull down, not the front, because you might be dead or it would have been way worse. And I thought, okay, maybe that's not the most helpful conversation, but you know what? I'm going to sit in appreciation for that. And then I was like, well, what else am I appreciative for? Because to me, I hadn't yet understood the extent of the injury, because this injury was keeping me from understanding the extent all the way down the spinal cord. But I just started practicing appreciation. And so that felt good. And I was just like on a mission to doing things that felt good. So out of that, I created this entire framework that I was just following the communication system between brain and body. That's all I was doing. That was all, it was it. But later, 3 years later, did I realize that, wow, this stuff is actually based in neuroscience. There's actually science behind why what I was doing was actually having such a profound effect, not only in my healing, but when I went back to work 6 months later, and by the way, I didn't even remember how to do my job, but my boss recognized, he's like, you're so happy and productive and steady. And what are you doing? Like, he wanted to understand what I had been doing, because I had created this program that I didn't realize I created. So we all have that power within us, but we've become kind of so separate from our own bodies and kind of our own power that we forget. We forget. That's kind of that it in a nutshell. Thank you, Vado.
So first of all, Lynn, thank you so much for sharing your journey, because we both appreciate the fact that you're recounting those experiences, and certainly it is not so easy to relive those moments. So full appreciation to you for coming forward and sharing the story, so that it might inspire someone else who is listening and who might listen as well. And one thing that really caught my attention was when you said about changing your perspective, having that attitude of gratitude and not spiraling down the victim mode, which is quite difficult to do, but you made it sound so easy. So how did that happen, and how did that come about?
Well, I'm going to be real honest with you guys, because it wasn't easy all the time. And I have been an overachiever my whole life. But I will tell you, one thing I really suck at is suicide. I absolutely suck at it. Thank God, because I'm here to talk about it. That cyst on the spinal cord, it created like electrocution, like shock into my body at a level of pain that I wouldn't ever think or dream a human being could endure for 20 seconds, let alone 18 months. Unbearable, unimaginable pain, unimaginable pain, to the point where, it sent me into the ER and I was shrieking because it would hit, and it would just like, I had no reaction. There was no time to react. And I was just scream, and I would fall to my knees, and then I would get up, and I was completely out of breath, because it felt like I had just run 2 football fields. And I would catch my breath, and I would hit again, and I would scream. And it was no way to live. And so they had me on these drugs, and at like 1 tablet for having once or twice a day. And that stopped working after a couple weeks. Then I said up it to 2, that stopped working, up to 3. And I said, that's it. That is it. I am taking these pills. I'm going to grab a bunch of wine, and I am done, because I was feeling like an 88-year-old operating at 5 or 10% capacity, and 30 specialists, and no one could help me. And that was it. I was done. And I woke up the next day, and I was like, huh, really, God? Really? Come on now. Now what am I going to do with this? So I had to do something. And I was like, my spirit is not giving up on me, so I cannot give up on my spirit. And I was like, I'll be damned if this isn't the day that I find somebody to help me. And it was. But now to answer your question, I know that was a circuitous way of coming around. But for the most part, I was able to stay out of victim mode, and out of worry, and out of despair, and out of compare and despair of who I used to be, and now this limited being that I was. So it wasn't until years later I had a conversation with somebody I met over LinkedIn, Dr. Gary Epler from Harvard Medical. And I said, why is it? Because I felt so darn fortunate. I'm like, why me? Like, because I see so many people at brain injury groups, et cetera, that they have a tough time. And he said, because you practiced appreciation, you didn't even know what you were doing when you were doing it, but because you were committed and because you practiced and you kept yourself out of those regions of the brain where you do go into victim mode and you can only be in one region of your brain at any given moment. You really can only know yourself moment to moment to moment because our thoughts can very quickly shift us into those regions if we're not aware. That's why, I, through this whole process, I was highly critical of my thinking. And I developed this term I use it called the mind style. So we talk about, our lifestyle a lot, but what about our nourishment for our minds? We really have to pay attention to that. But that was the answer. And he said, so appreciation was absolutely huge. And it was able to, by that continual practice and that commitment. And I developed what I call these 6 impact imperatives. And I talk about them in the book. And the number one was awareness. So awareness of, who I am right now, versus who I want to be, and what the gap is. And then awareness also of these negative thoughts that come into my field. Gaining awareness was huge. Practicing appreciation was huge. Being committed, like so committed to healing, that was huge. Learning about things that were going to be supportive of my end goal was incredibly important. And then practicing and repeating those. And then the last thing was when I had this intention of becoming whole, I had to really envision it in full sensation and attach an aligned emotion to that intention so that created a memory in my body as if it already happened. And again, these things just felt intuitively good to me. And later when I recognized the neuroscience, I just became like, I was thirsty to learn more. So those imperatives became the framework really for my coaching. Sorry, I talked too long there. Get really excited.
No, those are some great tips, and it really makes sense to understand how you were able to do that, because you told it was really in the subconscious and you were not really aware, but you were already doing it. So I can only sense that it is the way you conditioned yourself and the way you started embracing that change. The moment it happened, you were quite, it did seem very funny, but I do know the internal process is so difficult, and you just nailed it. That is all I can say. What do you have to say, Michelle?
Yeah, I think, first of all, it's amazing. The whole transformation and the whole journey that you did is totally amazing. And going back to what you said about your mindset and envisioning someplace peaceful, bringing in the sounds and the smells, I think that's something that a lot of people don't think of when they say go to your happy place.
Yeah.
We've heard that term before, that people only focus on the visual sense. So I think that is a really amazing takeaway. But one question I would like to ask is, so you had this awful accident happen to you, and I'm sure it was extremely devastating being alone, not having a caregiver. You were talking about your lowest point, and now here you are today, and you are working on coaching people who have had similar experiences. Some people will look at that and say, well, I could never do that. What do you think is, or was the turning point where you were going through your healing and finding a positive way to actually envisioning what you can do and how you can help people?
I think one of the things, because they were peppered all around. When my boss said to me, come over here for one-on-one right away. And I thought I was getting fired. And he said to me, what on earth have you been doing? Because the change is incredible. And then, and one day too, driving down the road, I just was overtaken by pure joy and bliss. I mean, this feeling was so natural, but so unfamiliar. But I knew it was how God intended for us to feel. And I recognized that I had done it I had, and also what I had done by challenging my thinking, I closed that gap between this personality, Lynn, that I had created over the years of my life and the core spirit that I've been pulled away from year after year after year. And that's where the power was. And that was really one of the biggest aha moments. I was like, if I can feel this good, anybody can. Now, two things, what you just said. I tried never to attach any meaning. When people were like, this is horrible, this is, in my mind, I was just like, no, this is just something that happened and I'll get through it. You know, I mean, over time, I had a tough time keeping that mindset, but we have so much suffering in our lives because we attach meaning to things that are inherently neutral. And we have to really pay attention. When we attach a negative meaning to something, no, 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 we're getting into those regions of the brain we don't want to be in. But also to your point about having no family, I think that was a blessing in disguise, to be quite honest, because caregivers, very well intentioned, they don't know what to do. And they may be saying, like when people would call me, what are you going to do? And did you do this? And did you do that? Oh my God. Like I can't this needs to heal. And I need to be I was in like a forced meditative state for weeks. And that was probably one of the best things that could have helped me in my healing. So I think there's a lot, and like whoever mentioned Paul Aliu, in Paul's case, that was a incredibly traumatic thing. And if you're a caregiver and you're witnessing your loved one go through something like that, you can even walk away with PTSD yourself. And so the caregivers have to have their own care. And so so I think, people do say, and I know, people probably who buy my book probably want to throw it in my face, a few of them, because they're like, well, good for you, but it'll never happen to me. I don't know. If you've got that belief system that is so strong, you're probably right. You're probably right.
Yeah, makes sense because in the end, it's all about what you believe and what your mind believes. And these two, quite often, we find are totally different and sometimes on the opposite poles. But in your case, fortunately, or I don't know if you really intended that to happen, I think what your mind wanted and what you want were in close alignment, which helped you make that change really quick and also to sustain that for so long because I know for sure I've had my own share of experiences with surgery, so it's not easy at all to be constantly reminding yourself to stay positive, to stay motivated, and to make a full comeback. I mean, you coming on video, sharing the story, and holding your composure, I think that really speaks the way of trained yourself, and it only makes sense for you to use that, create a good coaching program. And also, I've started reading your book, which speaks about that 6-step strategy, if I remember it right, which
Yeah.
we will be touching it in a short while. But before that, now we've spoken about your journey with TBI, the way you recovered. And there's one other thing that I see in you over our past conversations, which is having fun. So, what is your way of having fun, and how do you bring that element of fun into whatever you do?
Having fun. Well, that's the whole thing. This process, this is going to sound really bizarre, you guys. This was fun. I mean, yeah, there was a lot of pain involved. There was a lot of it, but this journey was fun. And when it stopped being fun is when I put it down. And writing my book was fun. And when it became a chore, I put it down. I mean, I was that committed to, if it doesn't feel good, I'm not doing it until I get to a place of, I feel like I've healed. Until that point, I don't care. If it's not feeling good, if it's not like bringing me my highest excitement, and you were talking about, being in alignment with that future vision. So it took commitment and it took dedication. But all these things that I was doing, I didn't know at the time, because of that commitment and because I was practicing incessantly. I was rewiring my neural pathways. I didn't know I was doing it. but that's exactly what I was doing. And I was creating an energy state that was more in alignment with what I wanted, how I, so, um, and people who know me pre and post injury, they say, wow, that was the best thing that could have happened to you because you're such a much better person now. um, okay. I probably had a way different energy about me. And I know I had like just this undercurrent of tension and anxiety, because work was so stressful. Wait a minute. Was it really my career that was stressful, or was it the story I was telling myself about my career? Um, but how I bring it into is I never took myself too seriously. And I want my clients to understand, don't attach meaning. I was terrified, you guys, to be in public because I was literally so afraid that I was just going to like start tearing my clothes off or just start peeing in public. And like these are the thoughts that were running through my brain, was so out of control. And I could have been terrified of that, or I could have just gone, oh my God, that's pretty funny. And when I went back to work, I still was such a fall risk. I had strategies, you guys. So I would walk around. If I had to walk down the hallway, I would be very close to a wall because I knew there's a good chance I was going to fall into a wall. So I didn't want anyone witnessing that happening. So I would always have a stack of papers with me. And then when inevitably I'd fall to a wall, if anyone was walking down and they watched and saw me, I would go, oh my God, I just found this bad mistake in my report. I was just bringing it down to Rocky's office. Oh my God, thank God it took me off balance. And, so like we have to laugh at ourselves and we can't be too hard on ourselves because, life is experiential and everything is important, but nothing really matters. And just keep a lightness about yourself if you can. And I can help with that too, but just kind of injecting humor. Humor was a huge part of my recovery. I had to laugh at myself. I remember walking down at my first trip to the grocery store, and my friend and I were walking down the cereal aisle, and my friend's looking at some cereal, and I just continue on, and I'm walking down, and then at the end of the aisle, I'm like, there's dairy. And I'm like, oh my God, look at all these fonts and colors and packages. And I could like, was paralyzed. And and people walking by me, and I was just like, oh my God. And my friend comes over and he's like, come on, that's enough for today. And so, and then when I was able to actually go out in public and and I shouldn't, the first time I attempted to go out in public and it didn't go so well. My sister was down visiting and she and I went to this restaurant and we sat at a high top and this woman comes over and she's like, oh my gosh, where have you been? And I'm like, I'm sorry. I mean, this was like 8 months later, 10 months later, I go, I'm sorry, I had a brain injury and she's like, Lynn, it's Karen, duh, like I knew this girl. And she was very gracious about it. She was very kind about it. And then I got really dizzy and I had to leave. Things like that, it's just part of recovery. And don't attach a negative meaning to it because then you're increasing your suffering. And so I just really had a laugh. And so yeah, it's a part. We want this to be fun. We want life to be fun. And we want everybody's journey to be positive, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Humor is a sure way of, I think, in my opinion, it definitely does speed up your recovery. And it also keeps your mood positive, and in some way, it's a welcome distraction as well. Michelle, any comments about humor? Because I know you're a caretaker yourself, so from that perspective, if you could just share a few things about how you find what you think about humor as recovery too.
Actually, I really don't give it much thought because it's just part of who I am and it's part of our relationship. So I think I agree with Lynn. I mean, if we don't look for the humor, what's the option? right? We're going to feel bad about ourselves. We're going to beat ourselves up. We're going to cry. We're going to get depressed. So, I mean, I have the two choices. Go with humor.
And, when we do go in that other alternative route, when we have any thinking of any kind, there's biological responses in the body and chemical reactions. And it's much easier to stay in like a negative feedback loop. And, when somebody cuts you off in the road and you say something nasty or raise a finger, and then you get over it, right? So that the time between when an event happens and you get over it, that's the refractory period. And when we're in that negative thought kind of spiral feedback loop, it's harder to get out of we really want to shorten that refractory period if we can. And just to something you were touching on earlier, Shreyas, is throughout all of this, I was thinking not in terms of my reality so much, but the possibilities. I always wanted to, and people always say, oh, be in the present, be in the present. And from my perspective, by the time I'm recognizing the present, guess what? It's in the past. And so I always had this forward focused possibility. I'm trusting, believing in that possibility of being whole again. And I didn't even want to bring in the word of, I didn't want to say I'm going to be pain free, because then I didn't want to bring that word into it. I just wanted to be whole and vibrant. And I just really focused on that as much as I possibly could, of course.
That is a great perspective to look at, and thank you both for sharing how you feel about humor. And definitely, if it is a choice, I would be probably taking it as well. So, on that note, I would now want to shift our focus towards you as an author, Lynn. You authored a great book. I think I kind of forget it. Authored by Impact, is that
Altered
right?
on Impact.
Authored on Impact.
I
So
just happen to have a copy, you guys. There's
yeah,
a glare.
and it is available on Amazon as well. And I think if you have Kindle Unlimited, so it is for free. So I'd certainly recommend everyone to at least have a look. So coming to your book, how did that happen? What prompted you to write about your experience? And from what I remember, you shared a little while earlier, probably the last week when we had a conversation, was people started judging you that you were not an authority, you were not a surgeon, you were not a neuroscientist. So, considering all those negative feedback and the negative, or I don't know what to call it, would it be negative thoughts surrounding your book? So, how did you deal with all of this?
Yeah. So when I realized that there was neuroscience behind, because when I came through this in such a positive state that I'd never experienced before, and I felt like I had a purpose, but when I saw there was neuroscience, that was when I was like, I have to do something. I have to help people. So that's when I decided to enroll in the curriculum to become a coach and to write about my story. It was very difficult. I will be honest with you. It was very difficult, and I even talk about this in a book. I had to go back into those medical records and read my diaries, and it was so painful. I'm feeling it in my body, and it was so painful. It was like I was reading somebody else's story and going, "Oh my God, this poor person, like, oh, what?" And hadn't even thought about what I had gone through and the pain that I endured. And I was like, whoa, so some days it was hard to write. So I had to just like let that soak in, let me have my emotional experience. And then when I felt I was in a better frame of mind, then I went for it. So that was one kind of, and then even when I was writing my story, I had this chapter where I was talking about me going back to work and all the challenges. And then I couldn't write after that. And I'm like, wait a minute, I'm having such a mental block here, a writer's block. What is happening? And I realized that I had just been writing about work, and work had historically been such a stressor that was blocking me from moving on. So I had to deal with that. But yeah, to your other point, one of the first podcasts I ever did, and right out of the gate, the first question was, well, does it bother you that you wrote this book and you're not an expert? And I was like, well, thank God I've got some good self-esteem here, because that could have easily derailed somebody. And it was kind of a silly question in my mind. I'm like, well, no, it doesn't bother me, because I am an expert. I'm an expert in my experience, and who better to write about my experience than me? Like, duh. No, I am. And how do you think experts get their information? From people who've had experiences. I mean, to me, it just didn't even make any sense. But I will tell you, people with TBI, sadly, do face discrimination. And, like me, I'm a fully functioning person. Now, do I have issues I deal with every day? Yeah. But if you are just watching me now, you wouldn't know that. You wouldn't know that, right? Because I'm still articulate. I wasn't for some time, but and I think people might like take somebody like me. Maybe if say someone like me is looking for work or something, right? And I've written a book, right? So if an employer out there is going to do a search and see brain injury and go, liability. And I think that's really sad, because a lot of people who have brain injury, and again, many forms of brain injury, um, they unfortunately are given a bad, the people have a bad perspective, which is not at all true. So, there are definitely a percentage of those who are going to be disabled, are going to be, not able to function in a professional setting. But there are many of us who can. So if anyone out there is, and I feel bad. It's just I'm not really sure what we can do about that. I have done a couple posts on LinkedIn inviting HR people to please let's have this conversation. And I'm not having a lot of success. So I'm going to try a different approach to that, and maybe reaching out to somebody on SHRM. But yeah, it's a struggle.
It definitely is. And I think what you're doing is really great. The only way we can fight this insensitivity, I wouldn't call it injustice, probably might be a strong word for some, but I definitely find it being insensitive, because seeing you, if I didn't know your background, I wouldn't really, make out that you had TBI and you were on the path of recovery, and you still, do great. You have this composure. You're not so easily distracted, because that is one thing which is a common symptom, which is distraction. But I can see you concentrate well, you pick up on our questions, you share your observations, your speech is not you don't stutter, so your speech is clear. So that shouldn't make for any ground for a rejection. So the only way I think we can fight this is by bringing more awareness and
Yes.
giving people like you a good platform to share your voice. And you're doing great with your book, but I think it's still the book doesn't really showcase you as a person. So it is only possible if we get you on shows like this, if we give you an opportunity to share your voice either on a podcast. So I think that would be really great if people, especially HR and those who are associated with various organizations, if they could come forward, collaborate with you, I think that would be really great. Anything you would like to add, Michelle, before we proceed towards understanding Lynn's style of coaching?
Yes, I think that your approach of approaching HR is an excellent way to go, because I believe that the biggest issue is ignorance. And anytime that we deal with something like this, people just don't understand because they don't know. They don't know what it's like. They don't know what the causes are. They don't know what the reactions are. They don't know how it affects people. They don't know how to help. So educating is huge, and reaching out to people, that is definitely the way to go. I applaud you for doing that, and I sure hope anybody who's listening, watching live, going to see the replay. Maybe some of our recruiter connections can also find out so they can help spread the word that there is some education around this, and Lynn really wants to work with people to understand it. So thank you so much for taking that step forward, Lynn.
Yeah, thank you. And you know what, too? I could be a tremendous resource for HR because people get brain injury every day in corporations. And if early on, I can really help them with especially mild to moderate. Severe, I don't know, might be a little bit out of my wheelhouse, but especially mild to moderate, I can get them started on these lessons and strategies early on, and I can help the employer understand. And you know, hey, I'm talking to you and I know like you can't tell the difference. I'm dizzy all up in here, you know, and some days I actually have what I call brain blip days where I feel normal from the neck down, but up here, like you might say a sentence and I'm like, I hear every word, but I can't make out. So, you know, you have these days here and there, but don't we all? We have our sick days, we've got our mental health days. It's just that, you know, there are people out there who've got other injuries and illnesses, and maybe their back's going to be out one day, and you're going to give them that. It's just a different type of an injury that people deal with. It shouldn't have the stigma around it. So thank you for that, Michelle and Shreyas.
It's a pleasure to have you with us, and I think you know what our next question will be, which is to have you speak about your coaching methodology and how did you come about it and who is your target audience?
So, how I came about it was just going through my experience, right, and seeing what a unbelievably profound impact these strategies had on me, and it just made me really want to help others. Now, I am. My title is Integrative Nutrition Health Coach. I call myself Integrative Nutrition Health and Mindstyle Coach. So again, lifestyle for the mind. So I'm going to look at somebody very holistically, and I'm going to look at, you know, what is your mindset like? What are your relationships like? You know, in your own mind anyway, because it might not be really what you think it is. But we start there. What is your spiritual practice? How happy are you in these areas? I guess I should say spiritual practice, relationships, career, finances, education, all of it. We look at all of it, and we try to establish 2 to 3 goals, no more than that. Two is nice. Sometimes even one. It just depends on the person. And then so you know, if your goal is that you need to incorporate a better diet. Hey, I've studied over 100 dietary theories. Yeah, I can help you with that. But we do look every person holistically. I do incorporate this mind style, 6-step mind style approach with all of my clients, no matter the goal, because I really want people to have sustainable results. And this is how we do it, by incorporating the strategies that are going to, you know, have our neurons firing differently and wiring differently and creating sustainable change. Because once you're done with my 3 or 6 month program, I'd love to see you again, but I don't want you to need to see me again, unless what I do offer too is sometimes a client will call and say, oh, I'm having a block. And I have a tune up. I've just got a little like 3-week tune up, and you're good to go, because you should be able to have the tools that are going to help you achieve your goals and have sustainable change. So incorporating all those things, you know, one client of mine, well, first let me back up. I always tell my clients right around the 2-week mark, maybe 3-week, and it may not happen, but maybe 50-60% of people will go, yeah, I don't know about this. You know, like, that's a really good thing. That tells me that you're making change, and your brain is going, ah, it's freaking out because it knows change is coming, and your brain does not like change. And once we get over that hump, it's good to go. But this one girl, or woman, I should say, she had a very serious goal that she wanted to attack. And sometimes people say what their goal is, and it's really not their goal. And that was the case for her. I had a client, for example, she said the pain in her shoulder was her number one goal. And we started talking about her relationships, and I asked her about her daughters, and she started bawling her eyes out. And she apparently her daughters had severed ties with her. And it was creating so much distress. And you know what that does? And then as she's talking, she's doing this and she's starting to rub her shoulder. And I could see, okay, your thing is your daughter mother relationship, not that's what's creating the pain in your. So anyway, but then this one girl came to me and said, I want you to help me with my tennis game because I haven't won a tiebreaker in 5 or 6 months. And I went, I'm not a sports psychologist, but theoretically, this should work. So let's tackle that, right? And just in that one session, we looked at her thinking when she was winning, or at least, that was about to win, and then there became the tiebreaker, and what shifted in here, and what shifted in her body, and what shifted in her energy field. And then I gave her tools and exercises to shift that. So 4 days later, she texted me, I just won my first tiebreaker. That was great. Within a week, she had won 5 more. So it's pretty cool stuff. And then one client I had, when she came to me, she was very timid. She had a brain injury, an aneurysm. Again, very explosive injury. And she wasn't supposed to make it. And then she had complications and she wasn't supposed to live through that. But she did. But she was very much in this compare and despair, the old me versus this me. And we shifted her mindset about that definition of who she is and what she can do. And she didn't know what doom was, and she's like, I'm never going to figure out. And I looked at the corner of her screen. This is how she was. I can't figure this out. It's too hard. I'm like, no, it's just different. She's like, oh, she's different. And she calmed down. And then, within 30 seconds, she was on Zoom, and it was all good. And by the end of the 12 weeks, she was sitting up in her chair. She was cursing. She had written her book. I was blown away. So it's amazing the change. But the clientele that I tend to that kind of tend to drift into my field are those stressed out corporate pros, probably because I was one of them. And every now and then, somebody with brain injury or who's come through brain injury and now wants to, get themselves powered up. And so, but, it's primarily that corporate pro that's stressed out and walking around going, is this really all there is? And everybody else is so miserable. So I guess this is normal. No, it's not. It's just familiar. It's not at all normal. And we're going to change that. It's about time.
Absolutely. I really love the way you set your intention to help your clients graduate from your program in 6 months without them having to, extend it beyond that time frame, because that is definitely one of the key things which really speaks for the credibility of a coach. It is to help your clients, give them the tools and set them for success without having to totally depend on you once again. So I really love that, and the 3-week tune-up really makes it a worthwhile offer to consider for corporate folks who are really stressed out. And Michele, any comments that you'd like to add?
No, it all sounds wonderful.
It sure does. So I don't see any further questions, and we have picked up all the questions that were asked prior, either on the post or through DMs. So is there any other questions that you see, Michele, before we close, before we ask our final question to Lynn?
Nope, it looks like we're all covered.
Perfect. So Lynn, the one last question we ask of our guests is, if I were to ask what your legacy is, how would you describe it?
That hopefully I was able to raise the frequency of enough people that they went out in the world and raised the frequency of more people that went out in the world and raised the frequency of the collective. I am not here to create a ripple effect. I know, people are like, oh, I want to create a ripple effect. Screw that. I want to create a damn tsunami, tidal wave of well-being. And the world is so stressed out right now, and we cannot normalize the level of stress that we're under right now. We cannot normalize it. It's not normal. So I want to create, I hope that I am one of the ripples in the greater wave that you're doing, that both you guys are doing, that are going to help create a tsunami of health and well-being. I hope.
That is lovely, because no wonder we got to connect, because what me and Michelle always talk about is raising the consciousness of this world one person at a time. And that is what we want to do. So start impacting one person. Doesn't matter how much time it takes, but in the end, as a collective effort, it will definitely create the tsunami you just mentioned. So thank you for sharing that. And as a thank you, I think our previous guests and those who see live know about this. So we offer you the chance to take revenge on us by asking any question. It may not be related to a particular topic. So you can ask either me or Michelle any question that comes to your mind, and we'll try our best to answer it.
Let's see. How do you think? Oh, thank you, Judith. How am I going to frame this? And here's a little trick I do when I'm at a loss for words. I try to tune into the energy, and then the words just kind of come. How do we inject love back into the corporate world? Because love is not a 4-letter word. It is a 4-letter word, but not in the context that we're normally used to hearing about. I think it's time that, and I know there's a good positive trend out there, but how would you address bringing that human-centered caring and kindness back into a business and at all levels? Is that too big or broad?
Michelle, probably she's the authority on this. And also she has corporate experience, which I'll be entering very soon. So I'll just talk about the experience later. So Michelle.
Well, first, I'd like to say that our own Judith, who's with us today, wrote her thesis on Lead Through Love. So that is a great resource. So I'll just give Judith a plug. Go to her profile. It is there for all to read, and she often injects that in her posts. Personally, I think we need to start with people as individuals. We need to understand who people are, appreciate them for who they are and the innate talents that they offer. Once we can start doing that, I think we'll be on our way.
I just connected with Judith. Yep, I agree.
Great one.
No, go ahead.
Sorry. So from what I see, the fast pace of life, I think love has kind of become a 3-letter word. Instead of LOVE, it has become LUV. And I don't know what it might happen 25, 30 years down the line. So having said that, I think the best way to infuse love, not in traditional sense, but that unconditional love, that was the word I was looking for. So unconditional love would come by just supporting each other. There are a lot of ways where we can support, and it need not just be limited to monetary benefits. So monetary probably comes the last of the list. So what you can just do is probably a simple smile. That really picks up the mood. Just speak some encouraging words when your colleague is going through a tough time, or even a simple "How are you?" might trigger a good conversation where people around you might open up. So that is what I intend to do as I start my corporate career very soon, probably in a month. But I think there's still a long way to go, and I can only just start experimenting. And from what I do as a coach, I often find this lack of communication is one of the impediments of spreading that unconditional love. So there is no communication whatsoever because people are so busy, they don't find time for small things. So I think that is one change that we need to really bring about in our corporate, and probably that is one thing I'm really grateful for the pandemic because that just did that. So people were forced to have this communication, start looking at alternatives, think about what their passions are. So I think communication would be one of the best methods to start infusing unconditional love.
Yeah, I agree. And even sometimes, you may have some sort of judgment about a coworker, based on what? Based on maybe they look a certain way, or that they have a certain voice, or something doesn't rub you. Challenge your thought about that and compliment that person, and just offer compliments, and spread the love. But kindness goes a long way. And oftentimes, if we're not acting from a place of love and kindness, it's because we're lacking that about ourselves. So it really does all start with the one. um, and yeah, I think we can create a shift culturally, but again, it takes practice, and it takes dedication at all levels. And I was with a business a few months ago where their training and their orientation touted this great mindset program that they had. And I asked, well, what do you do? What kind of tools do you have so your employees can feel the immediate shift in their mind and their body? And they're like, no, we don't have that. And I'm like, oh, all right, well, what kind of follow-up do you have? No, we just twice a year for 2 days. And I'm like, dude, that's really sad because they're missing the mark on that one, because it takes it. You can't like go, I'm going to take supplements for the brain, but trash the rest of my body. It doesn't work. And so if you think of like the C level is the brain, and the base employee base is the cells in your body, you need all of it. It's all holistic. It's all interinfluential. And so you need the buy-in at the top for sure. But you have to include everybody, because you can't send a signal when, oh, we're going to go have this leadership retreat with just these 5 people, 100 people, whatever it is. Why? We're all leaders. We are all part of the greater organism. And you have to trust that those cells in your body are going to do the work for the greater good. And that's in the best interest of the greater good of the organisms. And if they're bad cells, you either have to give them nourishment or they go. But if you look at an organization as a human body, there's a lot of parallels. But I'm sorry, I'm getting off on a tangent. I know we got to wrap up soon, but I think you're right. But if we start with kindness, if we're kind to ourselves, and if we truly get to a place of self-love, you can't help but have love for everybody else. So it all starts with us.
Well, it definitely does. And thank you for sharing about showing a little bit of kindness and compassion to ourselves. And I just want to remind our audience about how intention and energy can work. Just before we started, Lynn, if you remember, we set this intention to share the energy and just make that intention that internet will stay stable. And we probably aimed at 45 minutes, but we are almost at the 1 hour mark, and we didn't have any interruptions. So this is a very great example of what setting the right intentions and coming up with that positive energy can really do. It might be a coincidence, it might not be, but I certainly like to see that as a great example.
Yeah.
Michele, closing comments?
Well, I think that this has been a really great episode, and I think a lot of people will be eager to, one, get your book, Lynn, two, to connect, and three, to read your content. So would you like to tell everyone how and where they can find you in your book?
Yeah, so you can find me. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. Trying to get more active, but LinkedIn is where I hang out the most. I am on Facebook, trying to be more active there, but LinkedIn's the best place, or my website, which is just lynndelgaudio.com. Just my full name, as you see it there under my face, lynndelgaudio.com. And my book, again, Altered on Impact, is on Amazon. It's on more. It's on other places too, but that's the best place to go. And yeah, reach out, connect with me on LinkedIn, and connect with me on my website. And I would really love to hear people's perspectives on this. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much, you guys.
Thank
It's
you.
been fun.
Lynn, it's been a pleasure to listen to you. And once again, I admire you for showing up here on live, on video, sharing your experiences and your journey. I sincerely hope, and I know it will impact at least one person today. It might be a person who is watching this live or who will watch the replay either on LinkedIn or when I post it on YouTube. And please do connect with Lynn. She is a very nice person, and you will know that it would be beneficial for you as well. So on that note, we'll meet you again on the next episode of the Life Talk Burrito with another special guest who is considered to be a great expert on stress management. So that should give you a good clue. On that note, we'll see you next week. Take care.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, guys.